My name is Lyrienne, and I'm in my early 30s. Christmas morning at my parents' house had always been more show than sentiment. Giant bows, unnecessary decorations that made the living room look like a staged photo set, and gourmet food nobody actually liked, just enough to give the illusion that we were the kind of family that did holidays right. I knew the routine. I knew the smiles were rehearsed. I knew the warmth had conditions. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't prepare for, was my 5-year-old daughter being used as part of their little joke. She sat cross-legged in front of the tree in her best red dress and sparkly shoes, smiling like she always did when she thought she was part of something special. Her cousins, 6 of them, tore into metallic paper and ribbon like wild animals, shrieking every time another expensive box appeared. Tablets, designer sneakers, 2 matching VR headsets for the twins, like it was nothing. One of them unwrapped a gold bracelet and held it up like a trophy while my parents laughed and filmed on their phones. Then my daughter found her name on a tiny bag that looked like it had been shoved under the tree as an afterthought. No tag. The wrapping wasn't even taped properly. She opened it carefully, slow in that way kids do when they want the moment to feel magical. She pulled out a plastic toy horse, purple, covered in cheap glitter, cracked along the belly, and one leg missing. The head was scratched, like it had already lived an entire life in someone's attic. It didn't look like a mistake. It looked like a message. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just looked at me and smiled, that brave little smile where a child is trying to keep believing in magic even while holding proof that it isn't real. That was the part that made my throat tighten, that she was still trying to be grateful for garbage. My mom snorted. My dad laughed and leaned toward her, whispering something I caught just enough of to understand. Regifted. My sister giggled like it was cute, like humiliating a child was family humor. Nobody said a word to my daughter. Nobody stepped in. Nobody pretended they didn't hear it. They just kept filming the expensive gifts like this was the only story worth recording. I stood up quietly, no announcement, no dramatic inhale. I walked out to the driveway, opened the trunk of my SUV, and pulled out the rest of the gifts I hadn't brought inside yet. I'd spent weeks picking them out. Personalized things, wrapped carefully, tags handwritten, bows tied the way my daughter had helped me practice at the kitchen table. I carried them back in and set them down hard on the dining table. Nobody even turned their heads at first. They were too busy laughing and comparing receipts and telling each other how spoiled the kids were, like that was something to be proud of. I looked straight at the table, at my parents, at my sister, and said flatly, "You won't be getting a thing from me again." Everything stopped. My dad's fork froze midair. A toddler somewhere went silent with his mouth still full. My daughter was still on the floor holding that broken purple pony like it was worth something. The silence in the room wasn't peace. It was static, thick and humming, like the air before a storm. Then my sister screamed from down the hall like she'd been waiting for the moment to turn it on me. The sound cracked the room open. My sister came at me fast, wine glass slamming onto the counter like punctuation. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she yelled, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room. She gestured wildly toward the tree, the scattered wrapping paper, the expensive boxes. "You're seriously doing this over a toy." Not a question. An accusation. Like I'd broken some sacred rule by noticing what everyone else was pretending not to see. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room instead. At my parents, frozen in place, suddenly very interested in the countertop. At my dad, who had crossed his arms, that familiar pose he used whenever he thought control came from silence. At the cousins, suddenly quiet, eyes flicking between me and my daughter like they were afraid of picking the wrong side. My daughter was still sitting on the floor, the broken purple pony pressed against her stomach, her shoulders tucked inward like she was trying to take up less space. "She's 5, my sister scoffed, finally breaking the pause. "She doesn't even notice stuff like that. Kids don't care about these things." The way she said it, light and dismissive, like that was supposed to end the conversation. I tilted my head slightly toward my daughter. She had stopped smiling now. Her eyes were down on the carpet, fingers tracing the crack in the plastic like she was trying to fix it by touch alone. She noticed, she cared, and so did I. "You don't get to decide what my child notices," I said, my voice even but tight. "And you don't get to decide what she deserves." I turned back to the tree. especially not after your kids just unwrapped electronics worth more than my car insurance. My mom stepped in then, clutching a dish towel like she was about to wipe away a spill. Lyrian, please, she said, her tone already irritated. You're not going to turn this into some kind of pity party, are you? That sentence landed harder than my sister's yelling, because it told me exactly where she stood. You wrapped a broken toy and gave it to a 5-year-old, I said. That's not an oversight. That's intentional. My dad cleared his throat and finally spoke, his voice calm in that smug, logical way he liked to use when he thought he was right. We're teaching her not to be materialistic, something you've clearly failed to do. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. No, I said. You're teaching her that she doesn't matter, and you're dressing it up as wisdom. My sister gasped dramatically, like she'd just been attacked. You're disgusting, she said. You're ruining Christmas for everyone. You could have pulled me aside. You didn't have to do this in front of the whole family. I crossed my arms. So it was fine to humiliate a child in front of everyone, but calling it out is where you draw the line. I could see it then, the shift in her face. Not guilt, fear that I wasn't going to stop. I've paid for your kids' school books, I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt. Your rent when the twins were toddlers, sports camps, therapy sessions, the laptop that mysteriously broke and needed replacing. My parents stiffened. My sister opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. Every time I helped, I did it quietly. I never threw it in your face. But you don't get to scream at me in front of my daughter and pretend I'm the problem. My mom stepped forward. You can't punish the kids over this. I looked her dead in the eyes. You punished a kid first. I'm just reacting. That silence was heavier than the last. Nobody laughed. Nobody sipped their drink. My daughter was still quiet, but now I could feel her eyes on me. And for the first time, everyone else was looking at her too. My sister finally snapped, grabbed her phone, and stormed down the hallway, muttering something about lunatic and meltdown. She wanted me to hear it. Good. I wanted her to say more. I was done being the understanding one. I walked over and knelt beside my daughter. Ready to go, honey. She nodded and stood without hesitation. She didn't put the toy down. She hugged it like it mattered. That almost broke me. As I zipped up her jacket, my dad said from behind me, So that's it. You're just going to walk out and throw a tantrum. I didn't turn around. The tantrum was giving her garbage and laughing. I'm just responding. I picked up the stack of beautifully wrapped gifts I'd brought and carried them into the kitchen. Not the recycling bin, the garbage. One by one, I stuffed them in. Gold paper, hand-tied bows, handwritten tags. Gone. My mom jumped up like I'd smashed something priceless. Lyrian, are you kidding me? You don't deserve them, I said. And I don't feel like pretending otherwise. I took my daughter's hand and opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. As we stepped outside, I heard my sister's voice echo from down the hall. You just ruined Christmas for everyone. I didn't turn around, because what they didn't realize yet was that this wasn't the end. It was the first crack in something much bigger. We hadn't even pulled out of the neighborhood when my phone started vibrating inside my coat pocket. I ignored it at first, focused on the road, on my daughter's small boots dangling above the floor mat, on the way she lined the broken purple pony in the cup holder like it was precious cargo. The buzzing didn't stop. By the time I buckled her in, there were already 6 missed calls, all from my sister. That wasn't anger, that was panic. I answered on the 4th ring. Lyrian, you need to come back, she said, breathless. This isn't about the gifts. I asked her what it was about. There was a pause, the kind people take when they're bracing for impact. Dad used your emergency card, she said. The watch, the bracelet, the tablets, all of it. He said you wouldn't care. He said you'd expect it. My stomach dropped in a way that felt physical. The emergency card. The one I'd given them after my mom's surgery scare. The one they promised they'd only use if someone was in the hospital or worse. I pulled into the nearest parking lot and opened my banking app. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching. Then the charges appeared. Over $3,000 pending. A high-end electronics store. A jewelry shop I didn't recognize. A toy store that definitely wasn't the dollar kind. Luxury everywhere. And then I looked back at my daughter through the rearview mirror at the cracked pony sitting beside her like a bad joke. They already started calling the stores, my sister rushed on. If this gets flagged, they'll take everything back. I froze the card, reported the charges as fraudulent. One tap after another, calm and deliberate. When I looked up, my daughter was humming to herself, completely unaware that her Christmas had just detonated the family's finances. I hung up without another word. By the time we got home, my phone was lighting up like a fire alarm. Calls from my mom, texts from my dad, a couple of cousins already chiming in with question marks and "what's going on" messages. My daughter ran inside, kicked off her boots, and turned on cartoons like nothing had happened. I stayed in the kitchen, watching the notifications stack until the doorbell rang. I didn't bother checking the camera. I already knew it was my sister. She stood on the porch in slippers and a half-zipped coat, hair still damp, like she'd run out of the house without thinking. "You need to undo whatever you just did," she said the moment I opened the door. She tried to step inside. I blocked the doorway. "You lied," I said. "You used my card. You let them give my kid trash while your kids unwrapped thousands of dollars." She didn't deny it. She looked down, then up, then said quietly, "Dad was going to pay it back. He said you wouldn't even notice." That was the part that made me laugh, short and sharp. I noticed. "This is spiraling," she said, voice shaking. "The kids already opened everything. One of the twins posted the watch online." Good, I thought, but didn't say it. "Do you know how bad this is going to look?" I looked past her down the street, calm and empty. "You used my emergency card," I said. "You didn't ask. You didn't tell me. You assumed." She waved a hand. "Dad always handles this stuff." I nodded. "I know exactly how he handles it." She lowered her voice. "Mom's crying. Dad's furious. Everyone's saying you've lost it." I smiled, just a little. Then she crossed the line. "You're really going to punish the kids over this?" "The kids weren't punished when my daughter was humiliated," I said. "Don't use them now." She stepped forward again. I didn't move. "You're cutting us off after everything." "After everything I paid for," I corrected. "Yes." She looked at me like I'd broken something sacred. "You're blowing up the family over nothing." That's when I closed the door. Inside, my daughter curled up on the couch, cartoons playing softly. She'd lined the pony up with her stuffed animals like it belonged. I sat beside her and asked if she was okay. She nodded and told me she named the pony Lemon because it was broken but still cute. That almost broke me. Later that night, the messages came in waves. Angry, guilty, threatening. Not one asked how my daughter was. Not one apologized. I typed a single message to the family group chat. "I've spent years paying for your comfort while you disrespected my child. Today you crossed a line. I'm done." Then I left the chat and blocked them one by one. When I turned off the lights, the house was quiet, clean. For the first time all day, I slept. The next morning felt unnaturally quiet, like the kind of calm that settles in after a storm has torn through and taken everything loose with it. I woke up before my alarm, lay there listening to my daughter breathe in the next room, and realized something important had shifted. Not healed, not fixed, but finalized. I wasn't bracing for the phone anymore. I wasn't rehearsing explanations in my head. I felt empty in a way that was strangely light. I made pancakes like I always did, the cheap boxed mix she liked best. She sprinkled powdered sugar over them and insisted Lemon needed a seat at the table, propped up with a napkin as a placemat. She didn't mention her grandparents. She didn't ask why we left early or why no one had called. Kids have a way of adapting faster than adults when they feel safe. Watching her eat and chatter about cartoons while my phone sat silent on the counter told me more than any argument ever could. This was what mattered, not their version of family. This. I turned my phone back on after breakfast, not because I was ready to engage, but because I wanted to finish what I'd started. There were dozens of messages waiting. My mom accusing me of being heartless. My dad telling me I embarrassed him in front of his grandchildren. My sister calling me vindictive and unstable. An aunt saying I needed therapy. A cousin saying I should apologize before I regretted it. Not one message asked how my daughter was doing. Not one mentioned the broken toy. Not one acknowledged the card misuse. That told me everything I needed to know. I typed one final message, slow and deliberate. I said I had spent years helping this family quietly, covering gaps no one wanted to admit existed. I said what happened at Christmas wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice, And the moment my daughter was made to feel less than, I was done. I said there would be no more money, no more favors, no more emergency cards, no more access to my life. Then I sent it, exited the chat, and blocked every number attached to it. The silence afterward was immediate and absolute. A few days later, the retaliation started in quieter ways. I heard through a mutual friend that my sister was telling people I'd lost it, that I'd ruined Christmas over a toy, that I'd always been jealous of her family. I didn't correct the story. I didn't defend myself. I let it float because anyone who believed that version was never going to hear mine anyway. What surprised me more was how quickly the narrative lost energy, once there was no reaction to feed off of. Drama needs an audience. I wasn't providing one. Then the letters started. The first envelope had no return address. Inside was a single page, handwritten, telling me I was robbing my daughter of her family because of my ego. It said she was 5 and wouldn't remember the gift anyway. I stared at it longer than I should have, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not to reread, but to document. Something in me understood this wasn't over yet, and if it escalated, I would need proof that I wasn't imagining any of it. More envelopes followed, different handwriting, same message, guilt wrapped in concern, accusations disguised as advice. Each one pushed the same idea, that I was cruel for choosing boundaries over tradition, that I was punishing everyone because I needed attention. None of them acknowledged the card. None of them mentioned the humiliation. None of them apologized. They weren't trying to make amends. They were trying to pull me back into my role. I didn't respond. I scanned them, filed them, and kept living my life. We made our own Christmas traditions late that week. Hot chocolate with too much whipped cream. Board games spread across the living room floor. I pulled out the gifts I'd bought and wrapped them again, this time slowly, carefully, letting my daughter help. She opened each one like it was treasure, eyes wide, laughter loud. She told me it was the best Christmas she'd ever had. And I believed her, because for the first time, no one was laughing at her. That night, as I tucked her in, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't afraid of what they'd do next. I was prepared for it, and that readiness felt like strength. The silence didn't last. It never does when people are used to access and suddenly lose it. About 3 weeks after Christmas, an envelope appeared in my mailbox that didn't look like junk mail. No return address. Thick paper, handwritten in stiff cursive that tried to look calm and reasonable. I opened it at the kitchen table while my daughter colored beside me, lemon propped carefully next to her crayons like a sentinel. "She's 5," the letter read. "Don't rob her of her family just because you needed attention. Think about what this is doing to her." That was it. No signature, no apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just the same old move, dressed up in quieter clothes. Use my child as leverage. Twist protection into cruelty. Rewrite my boundaries as ego. I folded the letter slowly and put it in a drawer, not because it didn't hurt, but because it did, and because something in me knew this wasn't the last one. More came. Not every day, but often enough to keep the pressure steady. Sometimes handwritten, sometimes typed, always anonymous, always saying the same thing in different words, that I was dramatic, that I was unstable, that my daughter would resent me someday for cutting her off from her grandparents and cousins. Not once did they mention the cracked toy. Not once did they say my parents used my emergency card. Not once did they admit they'd laughed. I started documenting everything. Photos of envelopes, scans of letters, dates, times. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I just wanted proof. Years of being the quiet one had taught me that when people finally get called out, they often pretend you imagined it all. I wasn't letting that happen again. In between the letters, there were attempts at indirect contact. My sister's friend messaged me saying she hoped we could all heal. An aunt sent a voice memo about forgiveness and how family is forever. My dad left a voicemail that sounded neutral but wasn't. He said things had gotten complicated, and maybe we should all sit down like adults. I deleted it halfway through. What surprised me was how much lighter my days felt despite the noise, without the constant expectation to show up, fix things, smooth things over. I had space. I picked my daughter up from school without rushing. We cooked dinner together. We went to the park and stayed until sunset. I started setting aside a little money each month into an account labeled Us. Not for emergencies, not for other people's mistakes, just for us. One afternoon, I got a message from a cousin I trusted more than the rest. She told me my parents were scrambling. The store had taken the electronics back. The jewelry was returned. The kids were angry and confused. My sister was furious, telling anyone who would listen that I'd ruined everything. My parents were embarrassed, not because of what they'd done, but because it was now public in a way they couldn't spin. That was when I understood the letters for what they were. Not regret, not remorse, control. They weren't asking me to come back because they missed me. They were asking because my absence had consequences. The last letter came on a Tuesday, shorter than the others. You don't get to decide this alone. We're family. I stared at it for a long time, then added it to the folder. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt finished. That night, after my daughter fell asleep, I sat on the couch and thought about how many times I'd chosen silence over conflict, peace over honesty. I thought about the cracked pony and the way my daughter had hugged it like it mattered because she thought she had to, and I knew something else was coming. People who are losing control don't stop quietly. They escalate. The escalation didn't come loudly. It came wrapped in concern. A few days after the last letter, my phone rang from a number I hadn't blocked yet. My mother. I let it ring twice before answering, already knowing this wouldn't be an apology. She didn't waste time. She said she was worried about my daughter, that the family was talking, that people were asking why I was keeping her away. She said it like she was trying to protect me from gossip, not realizing she was repeating the same manipulation in a softer voice. I told her I wasn't keeping my daughter from anyone. I was keeping her safe. She sighed like I'd disappointed her and said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." That was the moment I understood nothing I said would ever be enough. If humiliating a child, misusing my emergency card, and then weaponizing guilt didn't count as crossing a line, then the line didn't exist to them at all. The final attempt came in person. It was a Saturday afternoon, cold and gray. I heard the knock before I saw who it was. My sister stood on the porch alone this time, arms crossed tight, eyes rimmed red, looking smaller than she ever had. No kids, no parents, just her. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway and waited. She said she'd left her boyfriend. She said things had fallen apart. She said she just needed somewhere to stay for a few nights, until she figured things out. She said family doesn't turn its back when things get hard. The words were familiar. They'd worked on me my whole life. I asked her one question. Do you remember what you said at Christmas? She looked away, said she didn't mean it like that. I know, I said. You meant it worse. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore, like I'd broken the script. She asked if I was really going to turn her away after everything. I nodded, not angrily, not triumphantly, just firmly. She left without another word. That night, my daughter and I built something new. We lit a candle on the coffee table and made hot chocolate with too much whipped cream. We played board games until we were laughing too hard to keep score. I let her stay up later than usual and told her stories about when I was little and how families don't have to look the same to be real. She asked if we were still having Christmas with everyone next year. I told her we'd have Christmas our way. She smiled like that was the best answer she could have gotten. Weeks passed. The letters stopped. The calls stopped. The silence this time felt different. Not heavy. Earned. I don't know if they'll ever understand why I did what I did. I don't need them to. I stopped buying love. I stopped trading dignity for belonging. I stopped letting my child learn that being small is the price of staying connected. We're not alone. We're free.